this way, and appreciate everything everyone is doing under the circumstances. I did go attend virtually, maybe some of y'all did too, the chamber event or Zoom discussion on Friday afternoon with a lot of people very interested in applying for all of the business loans, but mainly they were talking about the SBA. You were there, weren't you, James Etta? Did I see you there? And anyway, I was very impressed with the detail with which Aaron and his staff understood how the application process worked, and it was really heartening to hear so many people wanting to get involved and go through that process.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Commissioner Markopoulos.
Now it's good.
Part in a climate change webinar this afternoon, Climate Exchange out of Boston. They had people from all over the country and several elected officials from different municipalities, like the governor of Athens, Ohio, and the mayor of a small town in Oregon, and Cambridge, Massachusetts council person. It was really interesting hearing about all the different strategies and efforts that are underway to deal with climate change on the local level. And there was a lot of interest and support for our climate council idea, and a lot of interest in the climate investment tax. And people were really excited when I showed them a picture of the solar charging and told them about that. So it was a good experience. I learned a lot, and we got the word out on some of the good stuff we're doing here. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Price. You have to unmute.
Okay. On the other time, okay, I had a little difficulty hitting that button. So I had two things, and one is to piggyback off of what Commissioner Green mentioned about the Small Business Association grants and loans. And I've also been on several conference calls or town halls with Congressman Price and some other folks, the state association as well, to talk about these economic development, these grants and loans for economic development. And just, I did ask the question whether or not our chambers and economic development staff should be helping, and they can help, but a lot of the stuff has to go directly, they need to go directly to the bank or to the lender. But anything that we can do to push that message out, that's my petition, that we be forthright in that and get Todd McGee or whomever else working with, I get Steve Brantley to push out that message. The other thing that another meeting that I attended virtually was one from Local Progress, and we were talking about evictions. And I would just like to get an update on what is happening in Orange County. And I know that that the process, no one's going to court right now, but evictions that were in, if there were any that were in progress prior to the stay-at-home order. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorson, wham.
Yeah, so I have a couple that I'd emailed about, and but one that's not just coming off of what everyone else was saying. It would be good to get an update, periodic update of that loan program that we adopted last week, the emergency loan program, how many people have applied, how much money is going out, how quickly, also how people are getting the word would be really important. Just to know how we're putting the word out there. I've reached out to several business owners that I knew who they hadn't heard about it. We're very excited. So getting some sense of how we're doing on that. That would be just to follow up on Renee and Sally's point. So 3 specific petitions, which again, I'd emailed everybody about this, 2 of which I think are time sensitive, 1 of which is not time sensitive. The first is I had mentioned at, I think, our last in-person meeting, that the ABC board was, wrestling with the question of maintaining its status as a living wage employer with the newest adjustment, and wondering whether or not they should make that adjustment. One option would be just to make it for anybody who's not making the living wage and not for anybody else, but that leads to compression and other issues that we've talked about. The last time they did it, the first time they adopted the living wage, they gave everybody salary went up to avoid compression. And that's certainly the management's preference if they're going to do the living wage adjustment. I think we should encourage that board to make that adjustment, to adopt the living wage, to encourage them to do that, maybe through a letter from the commissioners saying that we support that, and we support the efforts that they've made to do that in the past, and that they should continue to do that. I think it would be terrible, especially at this time, not to continue with the living wage in the ABC. So that would be a petition for a letter, or if we need to vote on it, a resolution, whatever it takes. But it ought to be done soon, because it needs to be part of their budget now that they're putting together. So does that make sense, Captain? Do you need more information on that?
No, we actually started talking a little bit about your petitions at our last agenda review, but because they didn't go into public record, that's why we wanted you to state those three again. And so we've already started those discussions, and we'll get back to you after next agenda review.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you want to do the second? Yeah, the next.
Yeah, sorry. So the second petition, which is also time sensitive, is I think we should take the opportunity right now to bring back the conversation about changing the way the commissioners are elected. I know I saw this in one of the follow-up lists, that petition that Mark had. We had discussed it a couple of times. We tabled it a couple of times. I think it's an opportune moment because, for one thing, if we want to make any changes, we have to submit them to a referendum, and we can only do that in an even numbered year. So if we wanted to make changes to be effective in 2022 for the next round of commissioner elections, we would need to get it on the ballot in November. I believe that's right, and John can correct me if that's wrong. And yeah, go, John.
No correction. That's correct. It has to be on it has to be conducted at an election where all precincts are open. So a general election.
We had talked about, the other thing is we're going to have to redraw the districts after the census anyway. We're required to do that based on looking at population shifts and demographic changes. And I would really push us to consider getting rid of the multi-seat district model, the seat that was just elected in District 1. I think what we saw in that election was a successful campaign accomplished through single shot voting, which is of course certainly legal and a person's right, but I don't think it's reasonable that people should have to potentially throw away their other vote to get their candidate of choice elected. It was a complicated election. The District 1 seat was the only one that you could vote for two people on the ballot, which was very confusing for a lot of people. And it's also inconsistent that if you run in District 1 in the non-presidential years, like when James Zetter ran, it's a head-to-head race. But if you run in District 1 in the presidential years, it's a multi-seat race. And I think that is that inconsistency, I think, undermines the general fairness of the process. So I know we've got a bunch of options we can consider. I think we should have a discussion of that before the end of the year, and we should vote on it. And if we agree on a change, we should get it on the ballot in November. That's the petition. The third petition, which is not time sensitive, goes to this question of our housing federal prisoners in our Orange County jail. We had a lot of discussion around this when we were talking about the size of the new jail and how big it should be and whether we should do this. And we had discussions about that it was a revenue negative prospect for us. One of the things that came out of that conversation was some renegotiations of the contract with the federal government. I believe it's still revenue negative for us on a per person basis. And I think it's something that we ought to bring back up, have a discussion about whether it's good policy, and then have a vote on whether it ought to continue or we ought to stop doing it.
Thank you, Mark. We'll bring those to agenda review and we'll push them through the process. Thank you
I
for
had
that.
one other thing, which
sure.
which has come up since, and it's just because we have this climate change thing on the agenda tonight. You know, I'd like to petition whether we could look at a policy, potential policy, to incentivize private developers or property owners to install electric charging stations. There are some places, you know, the Chamber of Commerce has one, you know, on Estes. There are some shopping centers. There's one down in Chatham that has it, you know, it's near the Breakaway Cafe. They have them, they're accessible. And it seems like, you know, we have some in public places, but I wonder if we couldn't incentivize developers, particularly if they're, you know, developing commercial property, to include at charging stations, and whether there could be some tax incentive or something else. But I think that's something we could do to make those more accessible and available.
That's a great idea. I actually think that we probably should talk to the towns about that as well, because I mean, out in the county, I don't know how much building we do, but we certainly see more building within the towns.
Chair?
Yep, Commissioner Green, yeah. If you're on the side, it's easier. Yeah, thank you.
Just a comment from at least Chapel Hill's perspective, I know that the council, when there's a rezoning, they take that opportunity to require electric charging stations. So that's one avenue. Yeah,
are they actually requiring it, or they're requesting it?
Well, you know how rezoning works. It's legislated, so it's negotiated, but you don't have a right to a rezoning. So the town can ask for things, and that's something they regularly ask for. Yeah.
That's a great point, Commissioner Green. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I have two things. I'd like to get a report from our Board of Elections to understand if they are capable of handling a large amount of mail-in voting ballots. I don't know, you know, where we're going to be in a couple of months, but it seems to me as though a lot of people will take advantage of absentee voting, and I just want to make sure that we have the capabilities of doing a large amount of that. So I think the answer is yes, but I just want to make sure. And just a number of residents asked me that questions, and I told them I'd get back to them. So I just want to make sure. And then lastly, the MMC meeting, managers, mayors, and chair, was postponed by Chapel Hill. And as you know, this meeting is about the Green Tract. And we had gone through one version of the Green Tract Memorandum of Understanding. And we were, John and the attorneys were bringing back those changes, and we were going to review them and then pass them on to the boards. But Chapel Hill said that they just didn't have time to work with this right now. So we're going to try and get another date together. And I don't know, Manager Hammersley, have we heard anything about when that would possibly be? She doesn't want to come.
It wouldn't unmute. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have not heard since Friday when they're looking at the next meeting, but we'll keep you all informed.
Okay, thank you. There weren't a whole lot of changes to what John had originally produced. Just some, you know, some language and some, you know, minor additions. So it wasn't a big change. So we could review that pretty quickly and get that to y'all. We'll follow up on that as soon as we know what that date is. And lastly, I have been sending a ton of emails about what's going on at almost every meeting I go to, not only the COVID-19 emergency meetings, meetings with the mayors, meetings with our legislators. So I'm hoping that you're all getting them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a shout. Some of you have called and talked about some of the things already. But if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to take them. And I see that Commissioner Green has her hand up. And
Yes, along those lines, you just sent us your latest emergency policy committee notes, and I thought they were excellent. I'm wondering, are those being made public other than through these meetings? Because I think particularly the information about the EOC highlights with the surge planning and the projections and those sorts of things, those are things that people would like to know. So I'd like to know how we can get those more directly to the public.
okay, Bonnie, do you want to maybe reply to that? Right now, we are not circulating them. They are just going they're come to us, and then we're the mayors and myself are sharing them with the boards. I don't know if there is a plan to circulate them.
We can circulate them. We may even be able to do it through OC alerts like we've been doing on a daily basis information. So I'll work with Todd, Travis, and I'll work with Todd and figure out how we can get those circulated to the communities.
Thank you. That'd be great.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, Commissioner Markopoulos, yes.
Are the Green Track meetings going to continue through the summer, or is there a hiatus?
Well, we don't know. I mean, our second step was after the environmental impact study, which I think is possibly, I mean, we don't know if that's going to happen now because we're all in a stay-at-home order. We're not sure. I mean, that's some of the questions that I was going to ask at this upcoming meeting, but since it was put on hold, I don't know, but we can ask about that. I certainly would like to continue meeting and trying to make the progress that we've lost now by not having these meetings. But the manager and I can check with the MMC group altogether and see if we can meet during the summer.
Thanks.
Sure. All right, everyone good? Great. Thank you so much. Let's move on. So we have no proclamations or resolutions, and we do not have any public hearings tonight. And now we're going to move on to the regular agenda, and this is 6A. And we have one person that is signed up to speak. The process that we have worked on was that the person that is signed up to speak would be invited to the meeting as we introduce the items so they can hear the full discussion before we call on them to speak. What is on our agenda is not what the recommendation is. I sent an email out to everyone a couple of days ago, actually 2 days ago, might have been even last night. I don't know, time just sort of like just flows into one another here. And the recommendation was to, because of the schools contacting the manager and then myself talking with both of the chairs of the boards, both Chapel Hill and Carrboro, at this time, they did not want to talk about or take part of solar arrays on their schools. We did not vote on that. So the opportunity to have the Commission for the Environment to make some additional recommendations to us is still available. And that is what the recommendation is, not to talk about or vote on solar arrays, but to talk about charging the Commission for the Environment to come up with some additional suggestions for the climate mitigation tax. So that is my introduction. I don't know, Travis, if you want to say anything additional about that?
I don't think I need to. It would be not useful if you decide to move forward with that recommendation.
Okay, so do we have any questions before we invite Bill Ward from the Commission for the Environment in to speak with us? Okay, Commissioner Price?
Yeah, so what is the thinking behind going back to the Commission for the Environment to come up with other ideas as opposed to speaking with the school boards and school districts to see if there are other climate change ideas, mitigation ideas that they might have?
Well, because we went through a scoring process, the commissioners charged the CFE to develop a scoring process for each project. And so the projects, if the schools would like to send them over to the Commission for the Environment to get scored, then they can come back as recommendations. Currently, there are no additional projects that were added. Both school boards know now that if they wanted to, they could. I've spoken to both of the chairs. At the same time, though, we had put in place a process that made sure that the Commission for the Environment was looking at projects that surrounded social justice and racial equity. And so that is really important, I know, to certain commissioners on this board, if not all of the commissioners. And I think that the Commission for the Environment is also very conscious of that. It is a climate mitigation fund. And so this board decides what to do with that fund and on the recommendations from the Commission for the Environment.
So so are we sending a letter of invitation for the school boards or the school districts to submit ideas for scoring by this Commission for the Environment?
Both the manager and I spoke to their superintendents and the chairs, and they know that process exists.
Well, if we decide this evening to go that route, to have them, the Commission for the Environment, to consider scoring other projects, can we have a letter sent so that clearly states that we are asking them to submit ideas?
If that's what the board wants to vote on, that's fine. We also have additional ideas that the Commission for the Environment had suggested to us as well. So those ideas, those recommendations might move to the top. If we have any other questions, we can get them, or we can ask Bill Ward to speak now for his 3 minutes. Commissioner Markopoulos. You have to unmute.
So wait till after Bill Ward speaks to share a thought, but due to a scheduling issue that has clearly arisen due to the coronavirus causing disorganization amongst governments, I'm going to make a proposal that we do allow a brief period of time to revisit the Solar on Schools part of this. But I'll wait for Bill Ward to make his statement. I just wanted to let you know I want to bring that up.
Okay, thank you. Bill, can you hear us?
Can you see me?
We can't see you. No, now we can. There you are.
And you can hear me, right?
Yeah, Bill, welcome. I'm going to time you for 3 minutes, and I'm going to go 3, 2, and 1, and you can just get an idea of what the timing is, and I'll let you know when your time is up.
Okay.
All right. Whenever you're ready to start, you can tell me.
Okay, I'll start now.
Great.
It is a disappointment that Chapel Hill and Orange County Schools have declined the funds for the rooftop solar. And at this point, I'm not sure what it is, and I sort of agree with what Commissioner Price was saying before. I think the CFE, or Commission for the Environment, would be welcoming an interchange with the schools to understand what they could do to mitigate. One thing. But in any event, climate change still remains a clear and present danger, and Orange County's carbon dioxide emissions are contributing to the problem. The recently published Orange County Greenhouse Gas Inventory for 2017 showed that Orange County emitted about 1.8 million metric tons of greenhouse gases in 2017. And since then, in about the 2.25 years that have passed since the end of 2017, we've put out another roughly 4 million metric tons. Okay. And so we need to look to ways to try and curtail these emissions. And the primary methods to abate these emissions can be classed in 3 broad categories. One is decarbonization of electricity, improved energy efficiency, and beneficial electrification. And those are things that people have chosen all across the country, because most of the communities face a similar problem, and there are similar solutions that can be applied. And these solutions are represented in climate action plans at the national, state, and community level. Again, methods, and we can use those as a resource to help us come up with other proposals beyond what you have originally seen. And that's what the Orange County Commission then could, Commission for the Environment, could take a look at these options and recommend those that are best suited for Orange County. And then we would welcome from however those recommendations could come. If there's a more, another public way in which they could be solicited, I think we would be welcome to it. And I'm hoping then that we could look at sort of the bang for the buck, right? In terms of how much carbon dioxide you get reduced for the money you're spending, and try and quantify that for each of the different options. And that is one of the primary things that's been established already in the rubric. So, and I think the rubric that we used before is good and should help us guide us in the future too in our decision making. Yeah, that's basically it. Not the only other point I'd like to make. I'm hoping there would be a forum or a venue by which the CFE could work and have a give and take with the commissioners, so they could understand in some detail what our thinking is and what our priorities are, and among the broad range of options, why we chose the ones we did. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for joining us. You're our first test of a public comment, and we really appreciate you logging on and talking with us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, commissioners, let's if we can, let's stay focused on what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to send this back to the CFE for additional recommendations. Commissioner Markopoulos.
So I set out to explore why this all went off the rails, and it's pretty clear that Chapel Hill Carver City School System has a different perspective. They essentially want to make the decision themselves on how the money will be spent, and they interpret it to mean maintenance issues and other things are fair game. But so in that sense, they did veer away from the solar system on schools idea. But it's a different situation with the Orange County schools. I spoke with the Orange County School Board member, Hillary McKenzie, and then I also spoke with Will Atherton, the chair, and found out that Sarah Pitts, their point person, their administrative point person on this project, has been looking forward to a meeting with Orange County staff on this Thursday. And in her mind, this is not a done deal. She was looking to learn more about the way this array might be installed and answer questions. So, and it's pretty clear to me, like I said before, that this is a function of some confusion, disorganization caused by this emergency. And I think at this point in time, based on both Hillary McKenzie and Will Atherton's statements, that they are still open to the idea and just want to get answers to their questions. So I asked him if he would be comfortable if, in the interest of not slowing things down, if I made a proposal that we give them 2 weeks, and our commitment to them would be to provide answers to the questions that they still have so that they can make a timely decision. He said he would be totally open to that they have a meeting on the 20th, and at that point, they could make a decision up or down on that. And I think having come this far, and with all of the really positive attributes of a solar system on a school, that we need to allow this to happen. I mean, we're talking about not only reducing our carbon footprint, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking about generating money with an investment in the schools. We're talking about a unique learning experience that will prepare our students for a future in which the sustainable energy and dealing with climate issues will be of paramount importance. So I would hope that we would allow this 2-week period to give them a chance to have their questions answered and see if they want to be in or out.
Okay, Commissioner Price.
Yes, well, I also did a little exploring and talked to members on both school boards. And in both situations, the idea of solar arrays on the school, they agree that's a very good idea. But at the same time, there are some other issues with their school buildings that they would like to explore. And even in the situation with Orange County Schools, even though we could give them 2 weeks to look at it, to look at more detail, it's not a guarantee that the board would vote in favor of the solar array. It would just be an opportunity to provide more information. The other thing is that, and really, probably the main point, well, there's two main points. One, they were had not been brought up to speed along with us on this project, but with the COVID-19 and looking at our this very odd situation that we're in, and we've got people that are losing jobs, they're losing income, and we don't know whether folks will be even in their homes once this is, this pandemic has hopefully that we can get on the other side of this mountain here, and what would be the best use of those funds. So there are many issues that I think are affecting the decision, but it's not that they just didn't want to have solar arrays. It's just that what is the priorities at this point in time?
Okay, I think we just before we I take any other questions, we need to stay focused on the fact that this was voted in as a climate tax. So, and I believe John and Bonnie, you can help me. Legally, we need to spend this money on climate mitigation. So it's not for COVID-19. It's not for anything that is outside of what the climate mitigation would reflect. Am I correct with that statement? John, maybe you can help us.
Sure. So what this is it was a tax increase that is part of your general taxing power. What the board previously did was voted to direct this specific amount of taxation to this climate purpose. So a deviation from that purpose should only happen after a vote by the board. And I think that's the only way that would be able to happen, would be for the board to vote to send that particular revenue somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking. Okay, Commissioner McKee, and then Commissioner Markopoulos, if you can raise your hand on the little sidebar there. If you go down to the bottom to participants, you'll get a sidebar up, and you can raise your hand on that side so I can see you. Okay, Commissioner McKee, and then Commissioner Dorson. You have to unmute. We can't hear you, Commissioner McKee.
Hold, let me.
Okay.
I'm not muted. Can
Now,
you not hear me now?
Now we can hear you. You're unmuted now.
Okay, I was open on my mic. John, feel free to correct me at any point, because I'm going to speak to the question of whether we can legally move that money as a board decision. It's my understanding that only through county referendum can you dedicate a tax for a specific use. We did not send this to referendum. Therefore, a vote of our board can change the use of that money project to project or issue to issue. So just like this board cannot bind a future board on this, we can also not bind ourselves. I know we said this was going to be climate change, and I think that's what we need to spend it on. But I don't think that we are legally bound to do that. Am I correct or incorrect?
Well, you're not restricted in any way that is different from what you're restricted on from all of the general revenue. So this is, although we're calling it a climate tax, it is no different than the standard taxation that you have, the real property taxation. It's just an extra, I think, quarter cent, if that's right. It's no different than if you raise the general tax rate a quarter cent. The difference is you pledged by a vote to spend this only on this these environmental purposes. And for that reason, I think it would take a vote of the board to move it somewhere else or do something else with it. However, this board is not bound by that prior vote and could vote to do something else.
To follow up, so to be clear, if we were to spend this money for weatherization, for LED in school, or any other of the school projects that are already on their capital list that involve any reduction in either greenhouse gases, any reduction in electricity used through coal-fired plants, we're still, and this is an argument, John, I don't even need an answer, but we are still spending that money in those items for what we pledged we were going to spend it for. We're just not spending it on solar.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I don't
I'm
need an
sorry.
answer. I'm just.
Okay. Commissioner Dorson?
So Earl, were you done? Were you asking a question? I don't want to jump ahead.
I was just trying to clarify that this board can, because it was not referendum, it's not legally locked in. But that if we spend this money on any climate mitigation that the schools they'll have already in their queue, we could do that. It doesn't move away from our commitment.
Thank you, Commissioner Key. Commissioner Dorson?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so this, I mean, I think it'd be helpful just to think about how this process went, right? There was projects proposed, there were rankings done. These projects came up with the top scores, and we said we wanted to fund them. And the costs were based on the amount we had and what we thought the projects would cost. Now, what we found out is that at least one and maybe both of the schools don't want to go forward with that project. So it seems like, just like we do in like the home program or in any other funding model where there's money allocated by projects, the project doesn't happen, the money goes back in the pot and either gets reallocated to other projects that didn't get funded because there wasn't enough money, or we would look at new projects, which it sounds like what I think we ought to do. So because I think the 150,000 was not based on just the idea that's a number we want to give generally to projects. It was based on this project. And so if the schools have other projects that they want to fund, they should submit those as has been discussed, and they could get ranked. And then, maybe those projects cost more than 150,000. Maybe they cost less than 150,000. But the point is I think the process we designed is pretty good, and it should be project-based. So what I would suggest is, the 150 that from Chapel Hill goes back in the pot, and they're invited, as Renee and you, Captain, have suggested, to resubmit other projects. We give Orange County 2 weeks if they want 2 weeks. If they decide they want to do it, they can get that 150. If they decide they don't, their 150 goes back in the pot. They could submit new projects. There was a fifth project on the original study, the small hydropower feasibility study, which we decided not to fund. It was next on the list. It's $30,000. I think we should start with saying, okay, that project's getting funded. That's one that was in the queue that has been evaluated. It was ranked 5. I think, it moves up in the list now, and it ought to so we ought to start by saying, what I would suggest, we start by saying, let's fund that project. We had a good discussion about it. I know James Zeta and others were kind of torn about whether or not we should fund it or not. It has some real potential. So, instead of starting all over again from that, sort of cutting the line off at the solar projects and sort of saying everything below that goes back in the pot. We have a project. It has been evaluated. It's reasonably priced. I think we should put that project into the funding queue. And then if there are other, I don't know, if it's not clear to me whether there were other projects that were evaluated and just didn't get reported on, or But I think that would be the start. And then the other money goes back and we invite the schools to submit projects and we look at whether there were other projects in there. But I think it's reasonable to go, we had 5 things on the list. We funded 4. Now at least 1 and possibly 2 are not going to get funded. Number 5 should move up. That's what I would suggest we do.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorson. I have Commissioner Markopoulos, Price, McKee, Green, and Bedford. And I'll call you so you don't have to remember your order. So
Since Mark just explained that idea, I just want to say I agree with that the hydropower project should rise up and take a slot. So I just want to clarify something that Commissioner Price said. He seemed to say that the schools wouldn't make a decision or might not make a decision or something like that. So in my discussion with Chair Atherton and his explanation of the confusion around the meetings and the fact that they hadn't really concluded their process, it was clear that in 2 weeks at that meeting that they would make a decision. So after that meeting on the 20th, they would say, yes, we're in, or no, we're not going to do it. So that it really is a clear and definite end to this little time period to make sure that they get due process considering the confusion around the meeting.
thank you. Commissioner Price?
Yeah, 2 things just for clarification. So when I mentioned COVID-19, I wasn't trying to say that we would shift money over to that. I was just trying to make the point that other considerations are being put into all decision-making processes. I think that this money that we've pledged to, climate change mitigation should stay for that. And in response to Commissioner Markopoulos, I was just saying that, yes, they will get the information, but I was just saying it doesn't mean that they will necessarily vote in favor of doing a solar array. There may be other projects that they want to go forward that they would like to submit for consideration, which actually then gets back to kind of the way that Commissioner Dorson brought it all together, that I would be in favor of almost like an RFP. We put it out there that, if you're not satisfied with the solar array project, that we give the school boards an opportunity to submit other proposals. And I'm also interested in the hydropower thing. I still don't feel like I got very much information on that one, and to look at them all again. But no, I wasn't suggesting that we start shifting money to other pots. I was just clarifying that there are other considerations because of this pandemic.
Commissioner Green? Thank you, Renee.
So I agree with Commissioner Dorson's assessment of it. I think now it's clear that the Orange County School District was something happened with the timing or the schedule, and that we should give them that 2 weeks. And I wasn't at the meeting when you all discussed this the first time, but from what I know, I think the hydropower project is I guess I have a question for Commissioner Dorson. Is he saying that we should just go ahead and decide that that's in, or we give it back to the CFE? Either way, that makes sense to me. But what also seems clear is that the Chapel Hill Carver School District is not ready to accept that recommendation of the solar project, and therefore that's just like not a deal. So what should happen is that there should be a reopening of, submissions for that, what's left of that money. I wouldn't think an RFP needs to go out. I think it's just, there's money left, and invitations for projects are welcome to come back in.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McKee, Commissioner Markopoulos, Commissioner Dorson.
I believe you had Commissioner Bedford in the queue somewhere. I would defer to her because she hasn't had a chance.
Your hand went down and then it just came back up again. Did you take your hand down?
I had it. I just thought you all had us on a list already. Sorry.
I do, but your hand went down, so I assume that you didn't want to speak.
I can go later. It's fine.
Would you like to? No, please speak.
Okay. So one thing that's unclear to me is how this first round of, I think we're going to have glitches in the first round of any new project, any new process. So my understanding is that neither of the school boards, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, or Orange County Schools, have had anything discussion or proposals to them, and that Chapel Hill, Carrboro, at least, that they did not submit projects. So I'm not clear who originally submitted projects, but I did like the matrix and the evaluation that the CFE did for us. So I actually very much was interested in that $30,000 study of the hydroelectric project and would concur that we should go ahead and approve that tonight. And I think we need to do a little more work on the process because it's April, we have May, we have June, and the next year rolls around. So if we're going to accept new proposals and encourage them, both by the CFE or the public or departments, I need to know how it actually works. And it's not too early to go ahead and proceed with, for next year, start developing projects. I'm fine. I support Commissioner Markopoulos's idea to give Orange County Schools the additional 2 weeks so that they can put it on their agenda and discuss if they want to proceed with the solar. We received at least 2 emails, I guess, that I saw that not only reflect the climate mitigation and action, but also the educational value of that. And frankly, I would give the Chapel Hill Carrboro School Board two weeks also if they wanted to, because they haven't discussed it, if they want to just discuss it, but understanding that that's the project, not substitute projects at this time in those 2 weeks. And then for the next round, depending on how we develop the proposal process, let both districts, the public, departments, everybody propose them, as well as the CFE. I really liked what Bill Ward said about them being able to develop a matrix, so to speak, of projects, the payback, the value, the impact, and how, and then they can rank them for us and do that work for us. So that's what I've got to offer.
Okay, Commissioner McKee, before you go, can I just get a clarification from Commissioner Bedford?
Of course.
So Commissioner Bedford, if we're going back to the Orange County Schools and saying to them, we're going to give you 2 weeks to talk about the solar array, shouldn't we be offering that to Chapel Hill as well?
That's what I thought. That's what I was trying to say.
About the solar array, though. I'm not
solar and only solar, right?
Right. Not additional projects.
Right.
Going back and asking them if they would like to reconsider, since Orange County is also having that 2 week period to think about this.
Especially because as we know, Chapel Hill, their superintendent had asked us to, their superintendent who's on medical leave had asked us to defer. And I feel there's been a series of miscommunications, and then she's on medical leave and they're in sort of a crisis status, that giving them that 2 weeks just for the solar project and they can decline it would be equitable.
Yeah, because I'm feeling the same way. If we're going to offer that to Orange County, I don't see why we wouldn't go ahead and make that offer to the Chapel Hill school system as well. So thank you for raising that. Okay, Commissioner McKee.
Yes, I'm a little concerned that we may be a little off track here, because we got an email the other day that said Chapel Hill Carrboro City School System no longer supports solar panel program. And then tonight it's been mentioned that the schools declined the solar project. And my computer just went down. If you'll go to somebody else, I'll get
Patrick Abeli wrote us a letter that said that they did not decline it. But when the original conversations began, Commissioner McKee, we were told that the school systems did not want to partake in the solar arrays right at this point. So that was the message that I passed on to you all.
Did we get that?
Yes, I sent that message to you all.
I mean, I saw that we got the I saw that email, but did we get something from the school system that specifically said they did not want this solar project?
Yes, today we got an email from Patrick Bealey that told us that that it's not that they don't like solar projects, they just weren't ready to work on this solar project now. But I think that with Commissioner,
I'm going to read this into to the record because I don't agree with that. His email, third paragraph, I'm not going to read the first two because it identifies staff. Third paragraph starts, we are hearing that there is a discussion in the public today that we have turned down the solar funds from the BOCC. To clarify, we have never turned down a solar project. We asked the last time this came up on the agenda that the BOCC allow the Board of Education an opportunity to review and provide feedback on this type of project. We do not currently have a solar project identified. The next paragraph goes on, a better format would be to provide the funding for sustainability projects, in parentheses, not just solar, which is in line with the district capital initiatives already presented in our capital investment plan. You also mentioned having a grant process for funds reserved, and schools should apply for the funds when projects are identified. Either of these options would be more suitable to establishing sustainable outcomes. Now, that was the email we got at 5:27. It doesn't say anything about them declining solar. And so I'm, having read that, my concern with where we're at right now is we're talking about giving these school systems, which are supposed to be our partners, a 2-week deadline to negotiate with staff at some level, and hopefully it will be at a higher level than the previous discussion, to go back to their staff to get an agenda prepared and to vote 2 weeks from now. And we're giving them an ultimatum here. We're not saying, can you work this out with us? Can we negotiate? Can we pick a project? And then we'll move this forward after discussion and after consideration. We're essentially saying you got 2 weeks to make up your mind to take solar, and that's your only option. That's what the discussion right now is. Not working with our partners, but giving a deadline and giving an ultimatum. I'm not going to vote for that. If we're going to be partners, if we're going to talk about one orange, if we're going to talk about supporting our school systems, let's step up and support our school systems. Let's have a discussion at the manager, superintendent, top level management staff level about what the schools want, what the schools need, how to best accommodate that if possible within their identified projects. I am absolutely not going to give an ultimatum to somebody that's supposed to be a partner and we're supposed to be partnering with on everything we do, including this.
thank you. Commissioner Markopoulos. Commissioner Markopoulos?
No, there's no ultimatum. There's no ultimatum with the Orange County schools. I had a very collegial conversation with the school board member and the chair, and he said it's totally reasonable. They've gotten a lot of the information that they wanted. They need a little bit more. There's this meeting on Thursday. They're fully prepared to deal with it on the 20th. In regard to the Chapel Hill Carborough schools, they, Mr. Abili and Dan Schnitzer, their sustainability director, were given information about it, and they signaled to the county that they were in favor of it. And then they went to the school board, and the school board said, no, we want the money for some component of an HVAC system that they claimed would be climate mitigating because it made the system more efficient. And they knew that it was time to say to us, since we were having this meeting tonight, whether or not they wanted to go forward with the solar. And they didn't say that, right? And so there's no ultimatum here. We're just trying to follow, the bouncing ball here. It hasn't been the best process. It hasn't been the best communication. And it's, I understand that. It's been difficult during this crisis, but it was also difficult during the early part of the year when they were supposed to meet with us and talk about it, and then they postponed it. There's, been a lot of questionable moves there. But apart from that, I'll just say, I think it's totally fair that 2 weeks, they've had plenty of time to think about this. We don't need to keep extending more time. It's good enough for Orange County schools that, I know that, Dan Schnitzer is a sustainability guy, right? And Orange County Schools does not have someone who specializes in that. So they have an administrator who's having a little bit more of a difficult time understanding the concepts and the language. But I think it's totally fair that we offer them both the 2 weeks. And in regard to a different issue, we're talking about making sure that the schools get a letter, clearly delineating that they can add more projects for consideration of the Commission for the Environment. And that's fine. But we need to make sure that this gets out to all sectors of the public. We don't just, single out the schools and say, okay, you're really important in this, so we're sending you a special letter. We want to get it out to the communities. We want to get it out to organizations throughout the county, OWASA, even the university. Everybody needs to have a chance to throw their ideas in the hopper.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorson.
Yeah, so first, a long time ago, Commissioner, I think it was Sally, asked if I was suggesting we vote tonight on the $30,000 project, and I was. I think that we can do that. I mean, if this is the appropriate time to do that, I do think, like I said, that project is back at the, not the top, but at the top of the next projects. So I would support saying we're going to put that money into that project. On the school thing, I think we had set aside these funds for these two projects. If these projects are not going forward, then that money goes back into the pot. I want to be clear, and I think, Earl, you would agree with this, but I'm not sure. I want to be clear. What we've never suggested is, here's $150,000 for the schools. You're going to get to do whatever you want with it. And I want to be clear that by them saying they don't want to do or they can't do the solar project, and no judgment in that, given the crisis and everything else, but the option is then that money goes back in the pot and you come forward with what you think are reasonable, climate change beneficial projects. It's not, the funding wasn't just, here's a pot, here you get this pot and you get to do what you want with it. And I think that was the consensus of our discussion at the time. So I think if we want to, so I guess one thing is, I think we should vote tonight, or I will make a motion to approve the $30,000 for that project whenever, Captain, you decide it's appropriate to have motions. The second thing I think we want to decide is the remaining money. What is our goal with that? When we adopted this allocation, one of the issues in the debate was that we wanted to get this money out quickly, right? We certainly didn't want to give the impression, or in fact, to be collecting this tax and just sitting on it. So one question is it our goal to distribute the full 450,000, whatever it is this year, or would we be comfortable with carrying over some of it, either to give the schools more time, or any project, as Mark Markopoulos said, any project more time, or do we want to say we would like to get it all out this year, give anybody who wants to a chance to put in some new projects, and reasonably say we're right smack in the budget season. We know how much is in the pot. It's going to be $270,000 if we approve the water study, and we hope to push those out this year. We think it's important. I feel like we made a commitment, or I did when I spoke to voters, when I supported the increase, that we were going to push this money out quickly in recognition of the crisis, the climate crisis. And I think that's still reasonable. And I think, and that could be projects like Mark said from anybody else. It could be other projects in the county. If we think solar is the best bang for the buck, as Mr. Ward said, I know we have, Rogers Road, we could put it on, when there may be buildings that the county has, we could put it on. I don't know. But I think what we ought to decide, and I would suggest three things. One is, do we want to give the $30,000 We want to vote to do that. Second thing is, do we want to then say to the schools, if you need more time to decide on the solar project, take it. If you decide you don't want to pursue a solar project, we're going to reopen the process, submit other projects. They'll get considered by the Commission for the Environment. We're going to do it on a tight timeline because we want to give the money away this year, or we're going to do it, as we see necessary, and maybe we don't give it all out this year. I would not be in favor of doing that. I would be in favor of, I think a lot of groups, including the schools, seem to have projects in the queue that are climate crisis-based projects. And I think it's reasonable to ask them to do that and for the CFE to turn it around quickly. So that's the path forward I would suggest on this item, Kathy.
Thank you, Mark. Bonnie would like to speak.
So I just want to give a little background. When this was passed for the 1920 budget, we knew that this was going to be the first time, and it was going to take some time to actually put a process in place. So the process that we followed this year will not be the process going forward. We do want to spend the money that the year we receive it, because it really is the best. It's like impact fees, you get in trouble if you hold things back. So that has been our goal. When we did it the first time, we didn't open it up. We took suggestions from the Commission for the Environment. We had staff come up with some ideas and went forward with those recommendations. The next year, 2021, the process will be just like a grant process. It would be that people would apply, they would submit their applications for their types of projects that they'd like. The Commission for the Environment would rank them and make recommendations to the Board of Orange County Commissioners. So I just wanted to let you know we have a process that we want to follow going forward. It's just this year was a different process because of the short time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I have Sally next. Commissioner Green.
Thank you. I'm really glad that I now come next after Bonnie and Commissioner Dorson, because I heartily support the path forward that Commissioner Dorson outlined, which would involve getting the money out this year, whether the schools want it or not. Then to what Bonnie said, I'm glad to hear that clarification, because I was going to ask maybe a dumb question, which was, how did this idea of a grant to the schools or a grant for solar projects begin? Because I thought that it actually was a petition, like a grant process where anybody, the schools, a community center, or what have you, would make proposals for the money. So I guess I understand why it was done differently this year. Well, actually, I don't really understand why it was done differently this year, but I'll accept that it was done differently this year. I think it'll be much cleaner going forward if it is a grant process and everybody submits at the same time and decisions are made, recommendations are made, etc. It also seems to me like, because this was our first year, and here we are at the end of the budget year, finally talking about how to spend the money that we decided to allocate almost a year ago, that surely this process for 2021 can proceed at a faster pace. In other words, we won't be at this point in April or May of 2021. I mean, that's my hope. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner McKee?
Yes, Commissioner Dorson, you are correct. I am in agreement with you on the fact that it was never presented as a take the grant money and do as you please. I think it was quite clear from the beginning it should have been or should be for climate mitigation. The only thing I'm going to add is that I have no issue with putting it out for open call. That would probably be the fairest way to do it. The thing I will mention, though, is there's no other community or no other component in our community other than the schools that have a $300 to $500 million backlog in capital projects. Now, of course, the great majority of those have technically nothing that directly tied to climate, so you take them out. But one thing that I would be supportive of is giving focus, and we can discuss this as we go forward, giving focus or giving priority focus to these school projects because it does two things. It accommodates what we spoke to when we put the tax in place, that the funds would be used for climate mitigation, and they do have certain projects that would qualify. The second thing it would do, if we focused on these school projects, it would take off in a small way some percentage of their backlog of projects. We would be accomplishing two efforts with one move. So yeah, I don't really have any problem putting it back on, putting it back out for all call. As far as the hydraulic project or hydro project, it would be a good pilot project to see and learn from and figure out if it's going to be feasible on a larger scale. So if the board decides to move forward with that tonight, I'm all for that. The only thing that I will not accommodate and will not vote for is putting a 2-week deadline. We need to treat the schools like the partner they're supposed to be. We've got 2 months before we recess for the summer. We can tell them at any point in time, bring this back. There's no rush to do it in 2 weeks. I do not understand what the rational reason would be to say, oh, the schools have got to get back with us in 2 weeks. It does not make sense to me. And if somebody can convince me that it makes sense, maybe I'll change. But I'm not going to vote for any motion that puts a 2-week limitation in it, even though I would support other aspects of that motion. I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Rickey. Commissioner Markopoulos.
So the schools, I think, in the scoring process that the CFAE uses, have an advantage right off the bat in the impact that projects that they implement would have. So I don't think they're getting short shrift by being stacked up against other projects, because there's equity issues that the school has more leverage on, and bigger buildings with more climate impact. So I think they're fine in that process. One practical matter, we can't really vote to accept the hydropower $30,000 disbursement until we know from the schools whether they're in or out, because right now we have to assume that they might be in. That's $300,000. That's all the money that's left in the pot, right? So that's one small reason why we could certainly move ahead with a 2-week time frame. Like I said before, the Orange County Schools is totally in agreement with the reasonableness of that time frame, and the Chapel Hill Carborough schools have been looking at this for a long time. There's no reason not to move ahead deliberately, save everyone's time, get this thing going, and identify the projects so we can, actually get some benefit from it.
Have Commissioner Price.
Yes, I'd like to speak on the time limit. I'm wondering if we couldn't just go ahead and give them 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, we have a meeting, in May, the first week in May, and that should give ample time for school staff to work with the school superintendent, to work with the school boards, to see if this is what they, if this is a viable project. Gives them a chance to have, whether it's committee meetings or whatever, and then come to their board. I hope that they have a meeting between now and then to actually vote on it. And I think that's the way that we can be more inclusive and engage our partners. And right now, I don't know what the super rush would be, 2 weeks versus 3 or 4 weeks, and then just give them time. And then if they decide that the solar array is not a priority at this time, and then we can move forward with looking at the hydroelectric, or whatever it was, the hydropower project, and vote on that in May. And since that wasn't up, wasn't on our agenda today, I'm not sure. I guess it's all right, John, that we could vote on that at this meeting, even though it hadn't been advertised. But I wouldn't want to give up just in case, just in case the schools, both districts, decided that they wanted to use that money for solar arrays. We don't want to come up short. So, you know, I think we could do all of it on May 5th.
Commissioner McKee, thank you. Renee?
Yes, just to be clear, if we were to do the $30,000 for the hydro project, all it would change is it would reduce the amount for each school from 150 to 135. That's all it changed. I'm done.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorson? You're on mute.
I was just thinking that given that I think there's a majority of us that want to give this money out this year, I think it's, you know, if the schools are going to say no, we should ask them to say no immediately. Because if there are, I mean, again, I don't know if there are other projects that were already studied in the queue, you know, but I feel an obligation to disperse this money. And if the schools say no, and they don't say no till May, then I think we're really over a barrel. I mean, I think we ought to at least have the Commission for the Environment looking at other projects, either ones that were submitted, or I think we should open it up for other projects. And, you know, they could get considered, you know, if they're not funded now, they're in the queue for the next round of funding. But I don't think that, I mean, I appreciate that you know, there's a lot going on, and this, you know, but you know, we've been talking about this for a while. You know, it sounds like maybe the Orange County Schools wants to go forward. You know, maybe, you know, it seems like, you know, they don't have to have voted on it and passed it, but they could tell us that they want to do it, or that they don't want to do it. Because I do think, like I said, I think it's important that that this money be distributed, as Bonnie pointed out, you know, this year. And, you know, the process has to change. That's fine. I think if we need to do it better, but I mean, I don't like the idea of saying, you know, we push to get this tax and then we're just sitting on it. That doesn't seem reasonable to me. So I don't know if, do you know, Bonnie or Travis, whether there were other projects that were in the queue, whether there were other solar projects, whether there were other county projects, whether there are county projects that have already been started, but that, you know, that could be expanded with additional funding, like our electric car program or something like that. I mean, I think, you know, I think it's important to be able to turn to folks, you know, at the end of this, when the budget gets passed, and say, this is what we did with that $450,000. We did this, we did the weatherizations, we did this, we did, you know, and this is what's in the queue. These are some of the things that are in the queue for next year. And I don't think anybody would be, feel bad about saying you know, the school projects got delayed because the schools are in crisis, and, you know, and there's a potential temporary leadership change at Chapel Hill, and, you know, and there's other things going on. But I do think, I think, and I will not vote not to give that money all out this year. That is to sock it away or to save it for next year. I think that's irresponsible.
Bonnie, let's get a response to Mark Dorson's question, please.
So there were, the only project that didn't make it was the hydraulic project. So that was the other one. And the reason it didn't make it was there wasn't enough funds to cover it. So there weren't anything else in the queue. There could be more in the queue, but I think as the Commission for the Environment and staff, everybody knew how much money was there, and so they put together a list of things that would fit into that amount. Next year, it won't be done like that, so we won't have that problem. We'll probably have more in the queue for the following year. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. I'd like to weigh in a little bit on this, just listening to the discussion and knowing that I have contacted both chairs and spoke with them today. I don't think that I don't think that asking them to have a decision in 2 weeks is not showing that we're not partnering with them. This has been out there for quite some time, a couple of months, and I know that there's a lot going on, but there has been time enough where we got replies back on our agenda tonight. So we did have contact with staff, and there were questions that we replied to. I spoke to both of the chairs about the replies in the agenda packet. And I think that, if we said to them, we would like to give you an opportunity, and we would like to get an answer in 2 weeks. If you could do your best to come back to us and let us know if this can work. If they say that they can't make it work, then we need to move on. I agree with Commissioner Dorson. One of the reasons I voted for this tax was to start spending money to mitigate this climate crisis. And that means that we need to start doing it, not only spending money, but educating people about what we're doing as well. So I don't think that putting a 2-week time limit on it is disrespectful or not partnering. I think it actually helps them make a decision, because if they make a final decision that they don't want to do it, we have the water backup, that 30K, and then we could look at, possibly, someone said it, we could look at solar arrays somewhere else, some of our community centers, the Seymour Center, Rogers Road. I mean, there are opportunities for us to make sure that we start spending that money and really focusing on mitigating our climate crisis. So I'm open to any kind of motion at any time. And I think that we've sort of discussed this a lot. I don't know how everybody feels about going ahead and calling the question and making motion, but I'm open to that at any point now.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't trying to push out this decision, to next year. I think it should be spent this year. I was just trying to give more time, because I don't know the schedule for the school boards when they meet. And that was my reason for suggesting May. And I didn't know whether or not we were going to allow comment in our meeting in 2 weeks, because we're only required to have open comment, one meeting per month. So that was just based on not knowing what the layout was going to be for the next 2 meetings.
Okay, I have two more hands up. Oh, thank you, Renee. I'm sorry. I have 2 more hands up. I have, actually, no, I have 3. I have Mark Markopoulos, Mark Dorson, and then Sally Green. And then I'm going to ask that we wrap it up. So Mark Markopoulos.
So I think our motion should say that we will give the Orange County schools the 2 weeks, since that's really based upon their having a meeting on the 20th at which they can make the decision, and say around 2 weeks for Chapel Hill Carrboro schools, and find out when they have a meeting so that it fits with their schedule, right? If it's 2.5 weeks to the meeting, that it would make sense for them to make the decision. Let's give them that, amount of time. And so the one other thing I would just like to mention is that we can start anytime now publicizing the fact that we want to hear about projects for the next round. We don't have to wait until we've dispersed this money. We can put the word out that as soon as we finish the budget, that we'll be considering these projects. So we could speed the process up by getting projects coming our way for review.
Okay, thank you. And Mark Dorson and Sally Green, and then I think we should wrap it up, folks.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about whether we want to go ahead and vote on that 30,000, and move that forward since it's ready to go, or we want to wait until we hear back from these other things.
Yeah, Donna, when is our next meeting? We can't hear you, Donna.
I got you.
There we go, babe.
It's April, hold on one second. It's April 21st, I think. The second meeting in April, if you're looking for the first meeting in May. Let me find my calendar.
So April 21st, we can bring this back.
Yeah. It's April
That's-
21st
don't
or
have a
May
meeting next
5th
week?
or May 19th, May 5th or April 21st.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Dorson, what was
You
the
don't have a
question?
meeting next week?
You have a budget work session.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Come on, it's you're not getting away with that easy.
I
with
know,
me,
well, that,
man. I mean, what's the matter with you?
checking. I got it on the calendar. You know.
All right, so we do have a meeting in a 2-week time frame where we can bring this back, and we can tell the schools that we're going to bring this back. They're meeting, Orange County's meeting on the 20th. We can see what Chapel Hill is doing. I certainly think, like I said, from my conversations with Will and Mary Ann today, that both of them are. I think if we offer them a 2-week time frame, that they would be willing to.
But you would have to have enough time to get it published on the agenda for the 21st.
Okay.
So that
Okay,
would
so-
be the 16th unless you want to go out further to May 5th.
Well, maybe we can hold a spot for it, and if it doesn't work, then we can come back and we'll just vote on the water 30,000K and then open up the grants.
Okay.
All right. Let's hear from Sally, and then let's get a motion going.
Okay, I think it sounds like we're, at least some of us are coming to the same point of view. I now have a better understanding that Chapel Hill did not say a flat no, that there is a chance to let them say yes. And I understand the timing urgency. We can't, if we weren't at the end of the budget year, 4 weeks would be would be better. But I think we should go ahead and give both school districts 2 weeks, or maybe about 2 weeks, to say yes or no. And for example, somebody said that particularly if we think that Orange County is so close, that maybe they could say yes without even their board having formally signed off on it yet. I don't know, but so that, and then if all that falls into place, I would support leaving out the 30,000 until we know what's going to happen with the schools, and then having them next in the queue. But definitely, I would want to spend all this money this year for all the reasons that have been expressed.
Okay, Earl, you want to close us out, and then we can get a motion.
Yes, I've got a quick question. Evidently, I have forgotten that, or I misunderstood. Is it on the hydro project, the 30,000 does not fund the hydro project? Because if it does not, then maybe that ought to play into our decision. Are we going to just set aside 30,000, or am I incorrect? Am I
If we
missing
fund,
something here?
no, you're not misunderstanding. If we fund both of the solar projects at 150,000 each, if the schools do come back and say they want to go ahead and move forward with the solar projects, there's not enough money, the 30K for the hydro project. But that doesn't mean that it can't move to next year's funding.
Oh, right, but I mean, what is the total cost of the hydro project? It was my understanding, probably because I missed something somewhere along the line or misunderstood, that 30,000 was the project cost.
Yeah, I don't have that number here. I don't think we have that.
30,000.
No, 30,000 is the project cost.
Yeah, 30,000.
30,000.
The hydropower feasibility study for studying the installation of a hydropower generator on Lake Orange.
There we go. Okay, so
that's
yeah,
the
it was 30.
total cost of that project.
Somehow I got something missed in the wiring somewhere.
You know what happens. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
We got it. All right. So I need someone to make a motion for us and be kind of specific on what we want, and maybe put a date on it that we would bring it back in the 2-week time frame, if that is going to be the motion. So I see
I'll
Mark
make the motion.
Dorson's hand is up.
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I move that the commissioners reach back out to the school boards to inquire with some finality their interest in pursuing the solar power, the solar array projects as described in the CFE report, and to get back to us within a 2-week timeline or whatever the date sufficient for us to make a vote at our April 21st meeting.
Commissioner,
And
can we say that we would let the manager reach out as opposed to the commissioners?
yes,
'Cause
the
I think it's
manager can
important
reach
that the
out.
manager should reach out. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make that
Manager
one.
should reach out.
Yeah.
And that also move at that meeting, if either of the school boards chooses not to go forward, that we take a vote on the hydropower feasibility study.
Okay, did everybody get that? Okay, yes.
Question. I mean,
Let me get a second first, and then we can get the question. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Price.
yeah, I was going to second it, but so in the event that they need a little more time or that we can't get it on the agenda, would your motion allow for us to consider on May 5th as well?
Well, we can always, change the agenda at the beginning of every meeting. I mean, I think what we want to get from them is some indication,
Right.
definitively, if they want to move forward. If they say yes, but we'll need more time, then we can note that at the meeting. If they say no, not this year,
Okay.
then
I
we'll
got
know. And I would suggest, Bonnie, when you talk to them, to let them know that it seems like there's a consensus on this board that we want to expend those funds this fiscal year.
Okay, she's giving you a thumbs up. All right, Commissioner Markopoulos, you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick. I know we talked about asking them if maybe they can make a decision sooner or commit sooner. I would caution us not to do that. My discussions with school board members, it really matters to them that this be brought to a school board meeting and they get to have a full discussion. I would not want to make them, given the sort of the testy nature of this at times, I don't want them to think that we're asking them to do something before due process. So let's let them have their meeting and decide when they want to.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let's see, if we're going to vote on this, can we just get everybody's hands on the side, and then I'll let Donna know. So all those in favor? Okay, in favor we have Bedford, Dorson, Price, Markopoulos, Green, and Rich. All those against?
Yes, previously stated reasons, I will not vote for a deadline.
Okay, and McKee is against. Okay, thank you all. That was a great conversation.
6 to 1.
6 to 1, yes. Thank you. Okay, folks, I scribbled all over my cheat sheet, so I'm trying to find my... All right, we are going to move on to 6B. And as you recall, this was a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment, and it was a clarification of the setbacks from the West Fork on the Eno Reservoir. At the time, we voted to postpone this so we can get more information, and we put the date on it, this date today. So legally, we needed to bring this back here to say that we would like to postpone it again, and the recommendation from the manager is to postpone this until September 1st.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please put your hand up again on your side there. Okay, Donna, we have Bedford, Dorson, Price, Green, Markopoulos, and Rich. All those against? Earl, you're... I'm sorry, Commissioner Ricky, I didn't hear you.
I am voting in the affirmative.
Affirmative. Okay, I didn't see your little hand on the side there go up. Okay, so that's passes unanimously. Thank you all.
Okay.
Earl, you're breaking up. I don't know if can you talk to us for a second?
I'll try to speak.
Can you do the
Okay,
motioners
I'll try.
again? It was very hard to hear.
Okay, who gave us a motion on
I did.
so it was Commissioner Green, and who second? Commissioner McKee. Okay. Sorry, yeah, Commissioner McKee, your voice is going in and out. So
Yeah.
if I tell you that, just know that I'm just trying to understand you better. Okay, so we're going to move to Okay. We're going to move to the presentation, which is 6C for the manager's capital investment plan. And you all should have gotten, those that get paper should have gotten that this afternoon, and it was online. And so, Travis, I guess, are you going to be presenting for us tonight?
Yes.
I'm going to start out
Okay.
before Travis takes over. I just want to say that this budget, as you know, we start our capital budget process in November, December. So as you all know, this process started long before the world we're in today. And so as we go through this process, I still believe that the most of the items in here do respond to the mandatory needs that we have within the county. Some of them may be discretionary, and that's where we'll look to you as we work through this budget. We'll look to you for guidance on what you feel comfortable with. But Travis will be presenting this tonight, and then under my report, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the operating budget and the process we have in place for the operating budget for fiscal year 2021. But right now, I'll turn it over to Travis. Thanks, Travis.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Good.
Yes.
Great. So just wanted to start. Now, this is going to be a very high level overview of what's in the 2025 recommended CIP or capital investment plan. I thought we'd start with just some general themes that were considered as the CIP was put together. The first sort of major theme is trying to expedite the school deferred maintenance program. So what we've proposed to the schools was a supplemental deferred maintenance program that would total about 30 million over 3 years. It would be allocated by the average daily membership that is in place this year. So 60.14% of that $30 million total would go to Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, and 39.86% would go to Orange County Schools. The table here shows exactly so. And within that framework, within that general framework, we asked the schools to program projects, and as they can complete them. So I think one of the things that we've heard in the past is that in some budget years, because there has to be design and engineering involved, that some of the money that is budgeted in one fiscal year may not get entirely spent in that same fiscal year. So we asked them to put together a 3-year plan that would spend down that $30 million, and you can see how those requests were then allocated. So this $30 million program is in addition to the 11.4 million that we are recommending for traditional facility repairs. And then you'll remember last year we started a program that used bond premium that we had earned on some borrowing that we did for Chapel Hill High School, and divided that up. It was $6 million that we earned, and we divided that up over 2 years. So there's another $3 million in for additional deferred maintenance.
Travis, do you want questions to come as you go? Or you want to wait for people to wait till the end?
Either way.
Okay.
So the other 3 themes that I thought I'd touch on, one is public health and safety. So
can I ask a quick question about the school thing before you leave that then?
Yeah, sure.
So just to be clear, maybe this hasn't been talked through yet, but what kind of oversight or requirements would this funding have to have? So they would have to identify specific projects that they would fund with this money each of these fiscal years, and
Yep.
based on a priority list of their comprehensive list that they've been bringing forward.
Right. So we asked for a comprehensive sort of year-by-year list. We've received that from Orange County Schools. They've developed a very detailed plan. We're awaiting that information from Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools.
That's good. I mean, candidly, what I would like to see, this is a very oversimplified way of thinking about it, but, we keep getting presented with this list of, whatever it is, $350 million worth of stuff. And, so to the extent we're giving more money specifically in response to that, I'd like to see, a kind of thing where, okay, here's the first year, show us what you've crossed off that long $350 million list. Show us what's gotten crossed off. I mean, I'd like to be able to say to the residents of the county, we heard that this was a crisis. We've created an additional funding mechanism to begin to address it. And here's our accountability to you on how this remedy is actually resolving the problem identified.
Yep, understood.
So, yeah.
Okay, Bonnie, you have your hand raised?
I just wanted to add to that any priority or anything that the school district puts on their list, and if they want to change that, if something changes within that list, they will be responsible for bringing it back for board approval. So we will have oversight of it, and we always have that oversight. But it'll be the same oversight that if they say they're going to do this with the money, they have to do that, or if they change to something else, they'll bring it to the board for approval by the Board of Orange County Commissioners. So I feel like we have good oversight of this and working closely with them on this to make sure that they are able to check things off.
Okay. So the other three things just wanted to mention up front is public health and safety. So the largest single project in the CIP for next year would be a substation, EMS substation in Eklund. The board probably remembers we purchased the land, I think 2 years ago. So this money would be used to construct an EMS substation and also some space for morgue that the county is statutorily required to provide for decedents who are pending autopsy by the medical examiner or for unclaimed remains. We're continuing the economic development investments, one for PFAP, which would just be for some exterior signage and some flooring, and then some engineering funds for the Buckhorn EDD. This would be another phase that would make a site that has rail access accessible. And then the final note here is just, we're entering this with an abundance of caution. We did, as we wrapped up the CIP, we moved projects back that didn't need to be funded. We know that there will be a significant financial impact due to the COVID-19, but we also know that those direct impacts aren't immediately quantifiable because county sales tax lags by about 3 months. So so our May-June collections will actually represent what is occurring today. We'll get as good a read on that as we can, but at the same time, we won't be able to precisely quantify it for a couple months yet. And we also don't know if there's any potential lingering impact that will be evident in the real estate market that might affect either new construction that the county has typically enjoyed from year to year, or the upcoming revaluation process. So all of that is to say that as we go through the approval process from now until June, we're going to have to be doing some continuous monitoring and adjust accordingly. So, I think I would just ask for your flexibility and understanding as we need to react to new information that may come to light in the coming weeks and months. So in total, the capital investment plan is 36.5 million. Of that amount, 13 million is for county capital projects, 20 million is for schools, and 3 million is for the proprietary funds. So the proprietary funds are solid waste and the sports flex primarily. This is a decrease from last year's CIP of about 12.5 million. I would note that last year's recommended amount did include $20 million that went to the Orange County schools as part of their bond program. The last draw on that bond program is coming up in next fiscal year. So we've got just about $13 million left there. And you'll see that that's allocated between the two districts. 1.9 is programmed for Chapel Hill and 11.3 is programmed for Orange County schools. Again, that wouldn't be in this coming fiscal year, but the following. In total, we'll be trying to solve for a debt service increase of $3.16 million going into next fiscal year. In terms of charts, here we've got compared the 1920 CIP to the 2021 CIP. You'll notice that there's a general decrease in the total amount, largely due to that purple slice of the pie there, the school bond projects being in 1920 but not in 2021. So this is gives us recommended CIP projects by year. So as you know, this is a 5-year plan. Most of our concern focuses on next fiscal year because that's what you will actually authorize when you authorize a capital budget in June. But we do have a plan for the full 5-year period, and then also a look at what may be coming in years 6 through 10. So a total of a 10-year planning horizon, with the most attention being paid to the first 5 years of that plan. You'll see that both school expenditures and county expenditures are up in 21-22. That's primarily attributable to we anticipate that the Southern Branch Library will be ready to be funded, as well as a soccer.com expansion. And then that's where the expenditures primarily for the supplemental deferred maintenance program come in, because Chapel Hill again is using their first year of their money primarily for engineering and design services. So the largest installment of that supplemental deferred maintenance money would come in 21-22, and then, as I mentioned, there's the last draw on the general obligation bond for schools. Again, that's not this next fiscal year, but the following, but that explains sort of the variation in funding from year to year. Just in terms of how the recommended budget is recommending to pay for those, these are the financing sources. So next year, a combination of county capital and school capital, and then you'll see general obligation bond debt in 21-22 that will pay for that last installment of the school general obligation bonds. Here we've got just what the debt service picture looks like. So as we move into fiscal year 2021, this is that $3 million increase you'll see going from 30.38 million in 1920 this fiscal year to 33.9 million in 2021. Based on how things are laid out now, there's a large increase from 33.9 to about 41.5, 41.6 that would occur in 21-22 based on that 2021 borrowing that we saw in the previous slide. again, all of that can be, as fiscal years come into the first year of the CIP, all of those can be adjusted. But given how the CIP is programmed this year, this is what the debt service picture would look like. And going forward, this is just raw debt service numbers. So next year, of that 33.9 million in total debt service that is coming due, 15.4 million is for county projects and 18.5 million is for school projects. So whenever we talk about the capital investment plan, we talk about how it comports with our current debt policies. So currently we have a debt service to general fund revenue ratio. We've got a policy target of 15%. So you can see that starting in fiscal 22, FY 21-22, we will be exceeding that 15%, and that'll continue for a couple of years as those as that debt service gets paid off on those significant projects that I referenced in the 3 slides ago. Then you'll see that it comes down and our debt capacity starts to open up in 24, 25. So that's sort of the CIP by the numbers. Again, a very high level overview. Next week, we'll go through project by project, the county projects in year 1 of the capital investment plan, and then be able to answer any other questions that might come up tonight that I don't have answers to right now. We'll continue to talk about the CIP through budget work sessions, and like I said, may indulge we may need to indulge some amendments going forward as new information comes available. And then we would approve the first year of the CIP when you approve the operating budget on June 16th. So happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner McKee, your little hand is up. You have to unmute, Commissioner McKee. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Okay.
Travis, your debt service to general fund revenue projection, my assumption is that assumes that no new projects other than those projected will be added, and no projects currently on the capital projects will be completely removed. Is that correct?
So yeah, so what this assumes is that we take the recommended CIP as it sits in your hands today, and freeze it. So everything that's there in the recommended CIP today in years 1 through 5 are not changed. So, and when we start changing those, if we start changing those through the budget consideration process, then these numbers would also change. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, sir. That's exactly what I thought it was.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for Travis or Bonnie? Okay, well.
Great. Well,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And folks, again, we have the, if you get a hard copy, you have a book. If not, you can download it. This is available online now. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So let's move on to 6D, and this is.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Sorry.
No worries. You're in the woods now.
Yeah. Well, my computer pooped the bed, so I switched to a different computer.
Got it. Yeah.
It's a different stylish background. A nice new computer that Jim just gave me. And anyway, this is not specifically related to the CIP, but it's a more general budget related question.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I recall, based on our existing bond spending, school bonds and all that, we voted last year to implement a tax increase incrementally rather than doing it all at once, in anticipation of paying off those bonds.
Well, yeah, I think we started the first year of what could be an incremental approach. I mean, I think what we're going to try to do is manage the operating budget to avert or minimize any sort of tax increase. I mean, I can tell you that the tax rate equivalent for that $3.1 million increase is about 1.63 cents. But through the operating budget, we're going to try to avert that.
Right. So that's exactly what I was going to ask is there any way to, I mean, given we've got to be paying the debt service on these bonds, is there any thinking, given the crisis and the related financial debacle, is there any way for us to potentially avoid that anticipated tax increase?
No.
And still meet our bond debt obligations?
Right. So that
is there any possibility of any forbearance on those? I mean, is there going to be any potential, any of the potential legislation that's coming down the pike that might give us some opportunity to leverage some negotiation with our bondholders about that costs?
So I'm not aware of that, Commissioner Dorison, and so the $3 million increase that we're seeing in this coming fiscal year is for borrowing that we have already done, right? So there's always that 1 year lag from the year that you borrow it to the year that the first payment comes due. But I'm not aware of any sort of federal initiative. I mean, typically the general rule is you pay debt service first and then everything else you figure it out. So in the absence of other guidance or rules, that's what we're doing.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I mean, I think this is going to be a severe financial crunch for a lot of people, a lot of residents. And so thinking how we can mitigate that impact, accommodate that to a certain extent, whether that comes from, like you said, Travis, squeezing the operating budget, or whether it comes from, delaying some of the things in the CIP. I know we're not doing an analysis of the CIP tonight, but obviously that's something that is, I'm sure, weighing on all of our minds as we start this budget process. So.
Yep. Ours too.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, are we ready to move on then? Everybody's good? Awesome. Okay, so let's do 60, and this is approval of the budget amendment number 7 for the transfer of funds from the Orange County Local Rent Supplement Program to the Risk Mitigation and Housing Displacement Fund. And Travis, do you want to explain this to us as well? Your name is on my cheat sheet.
Yes.
Sure. So I did. So I'm sorry I didn't get this PowerPoint out earlier. Emma and I were talking through the last details of it just at like 5 o'clock. So this is as fresh as it can be. So what we're asking the board here is to consider a transfer of funds from our local rent supplement program. You may recall that we budgeted $100,000 in what was called the local voucher program. And that money is still there. I think it was originally intended to be more flexible than the housing choice voucher, but a couple things. I think the initial program rules still didn't allow the requisite flexibility that we would need to meet some of the housing needs that the Department of Housing is currently seeing. And that primarily is emergency rent assistance. So I think there's a possibility to ease those rules in the future, but there's also at the same time this demand for displacement mitigation and housing stabilization due to job losses and other economic impacts that residents are suffering because of the coronavirus. So what we're proposing, and as an overall strategy, what we want to do is, help people maintain their current housing. And I think Commissioner Price mentioned evictions earlier, and although there's currently a moratorium on evictions, that doesn't mean that people are getting their rent waived during this time. And at some point, the moratorium will end and all of that rent will come due. Or people will face eviction. And so our overall strategy here is to help people maintain their current housing situation so that they don't become homeless, and let this serve as a bridge as other benefits such as unemployment or transition to a traditional housing choice voucher can be accomplished, or through financial rearranging one's finances, some other alternative can be developed. But this would be a short-term, one-time sort of help for folks to maintain their current housing. So the proposal as it stands now would be for residents who earn up to 80% of area median income to be eligible. So that means $67,000 and $67,850 for a family of 4. Although we would give priority to residents earning below 60% of area median income. And so for a family of 4, that would be $50,880. So the eligible uses for the money would be rent assistance, as I mentioned. So this would so if someone cannot pay their rent due to job loss or other interruptions in their income, if they're eligible, they can apply for rent assistance. Individuals who may be currently experiencing homelessness or very at risk of experiencing homelessness, we could use this for temporary hotel stays, again, to help bridge that time until other benefits may become available. We could use it for security deposits or first month's rent. And in some unique circumstances, there may be a need for just to get somebody moved from one unit to another. And if that's the only barrier, would be happy to help with that as well. So as I mentioned, the program would be intended for a one-time use. It'd be limited to $2,000 per occurrence. We wouldn't necessarily turn down someone coming for a second time, but there would be some additional casework on that particular request to determine if there's underlying systemic challenges that need to be addressed, so that this is truly a sort of one-time emergency form of assistance. We'd use I think the last meeting or so ago, we talked about adding a coordinated entry staff person. So that person was hired and will immediately be brought into service using a housing helpline concept. So all of the applications would come into the coordinated entry staff person, and then she would be able to recommend the programs that best meet that particular individual's needs. So if there's a town rent assistance program that can be accessed first, maybe we access that first. Or if this person is on the waiting list for housing choice voucher and now qualifies for the homeless preference, maybe we go grab that. So that coordinated entry staff person will triage those requests and help match up the best program for each individual circumstance. So the Housing Authority did approve the transfer at today's meeting. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention, I think everyone was copied on Emma's answers to Commissioner Bedford about the program. Hopefully, I've addressed most of those here. The one that I didn't is about an asset test. So that would be something where we would ask about assets other than cash. So if somebody owns an asset, what that would be. You know, that isn't a bad idea for this type of program. And we just need to figure out with our affordable housing colleagues in the towns what that might look like. And quite frankly, we just haven't had the time to do that. But some, you know, relatively high $5,000 or so asset test might be appropriate in this situation. But we just want to make sure all of our partners are on board with something like that so that we can have consistent program rules across the different programs. So the manager's recommendation for this item is to approve the budget amendment that transfers $100,000 from the local rent supplement program to the housing stabilization and displacement mitigation program to be used for the purposes that I discussed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Travis? I see Commissioner Bedford.
So, thank you very much for this. And how is, so that it says housing hotline or something, is there a phone number? How do people apply for this when they need help? I guess some would come up from the homelessness partnership, some might come from DSS, but is there a phone number or something, or how will it work?
Yeah, so CEF was doing this work. It was a combination of taking referrals from other agencies and actually having a direct line to contact folks. So that's how we would envision this working as well.
Additional questions? Okay, if there are no additional questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
My little hand up there.
Did not see
So I was wondering, so what happens with the local rent supplement program? It sounds like it didn't work. I mean, my original question actually was, you know, how much effort was put into the, you know, to that program under the, since I know it was prior to the departure of the previous housing director. Then I didn't get to read it in its entirety, your response to James Zetta, but does the local rent supplement program remain, or are we going to be voting to dissolve that?
So it's currently in next year's, it will be in next year's base budget. So I think what we'll do, Emma and her staff were in the process of revising those guidelines to make it work better, because it's I think still a viable program, but in the midst of doing that, we began to see a high demand for more of these emergency resources. So it'll come back to the board in a recommendation to amend those guidelines or to do something different for next year. But this transfer would only apply to this fiscal year.
Thanks, Renee. Commissioner Dorson?
Yeah, so following up on that, I had that same question, but I think just a couple of things to note about what I understood we were trying to do with that local, rent supplement program with that voucher. And as I recall, the whole idea was it was designed to add flexibility to the federal program. So if what we did was just mirror the federal program's guidelines, it didn't have a chance to start to do what it was designed to do. It was also designed to target specific populations like the homeless or people at risk of homelessness, and to potentially help move those people off the waiting list, to reprioritize It was also designed to serve, target people at very low incomes, all of which I think are laudable goals. It was also designed to potentially reach people who would not be eligible for the federal program, like undocumented immigrants, for example. And also to, because it wouldn't be subject to the federal restrictions, the local voucher could be used, for example, for manufactured housing. So those were all goals that grew out of our discussions and the housing department's discussions about gaps we had identified in the general provision of services. So I think that I'm glad to hear that we're not saying the program is going to be just disbanded, but I think as we look at it in the coming year, we should really look at back at those goals and determine, A, are those still the goals that we want? And if they are, and I think they should be, probably, I don't know that we've made so much success on any of those fronts, then how do we tweak the program to make it so it works towards those goals? And then I think there is the other consideration is, as always, is priority. And so, we got that report from Corey Root early in the year about some of the low-hanging fruit in filling in the holes in our rapid rehousing and our, anti-homelessness work. And maybe those funds are better used in that context, despite the laudable goals of the local voucher program, particularly since we know that there's a real strong structural model in place that has already been identified, created, has been known to work, and we have identified real specific funding needs. So anyway, I'm glad we're not getting rid of the program in its entirety. I do think, given the fact that if we've concluded it didn't work, it's worth looking back at what I remember at least some of the goals in designing it were. So just to keep those in mind. And I think to keep those in mind, as in this presentation, you noted, even though this presentation says 80%, we really want to be prioritizing people lower than that, 50 or below. So keeping those directives in mind as this program gets implemented is critical.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Travis, can you put up the recommendation again so we can get a motion on that? Okay, folks, there's the manager's recommendation. If there's no additional questions, we need a motion.
So move to transfer the money.
Okay, so Commissioner Price is moving it. Commissioner Bedford is seconding it. All those in favor? Travis, can you stop sharing your screen so I can see if
okay.
Yeah.
I just want to got a question from Sally.
Okay, yeah, well, let's get the screen unshared now, and then we can do that.
Well, let me stop sharing.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, we can see
Sorry
everything.
to hold you hostage.
I couldn't see the hands. Okay, all right. Commissioner Green, sorry about that.
Yeah, no question, just a comment. I appreciated Commissioner Dorson's comments in full, and I just wanted to say congratulations on filling the coordinated entry position, and that is a significant move from CEF, but I think it's going to be really, and I think it's really going to be a good fit for the county to do, and I'm glad to see that this is all coming together in that way. And I appreciate the staff being willing to sort of pivot to respond to this need while knowing we have these other needs that have not gone away. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Okay, I just want to say thank you too. I know this is something that we talked a lot about, and we're really proud of putting this program in place. And so I would hope that it comes back stronger after the review, and that we will be able to help more people, because I think that's, as Mark Dorson said, this has always been the goal, to create a program like this, so we can make sure that we're taking care of the needs of folks here. So thank you so much. Good work. Okay, we have a motion moved by Price and is seconded by Bedford. All's in favor? Put your little hands up. Let's see. We got Markopoulos, Bedford, Green, McKee, Price, and Rich. All those against? Okay, that's unanimous, Donna. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Travis. Okay, no reports on number 7. And then we can move to 8, the consent agenda, keeping in mind that we've already taken H off of the consent agenda. So does anyone want to remove anything? I see no little hands. Okay, does someone want to move the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda.
Price, and
Second.
I need a second. Seconded by
McKee.
McKee. All
Yep.
those in favor? Okay, looks like all the hands are going up, Donna. We're good. Against? Okay. Thank you, everyone. County managers report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hang on, Bonnie, 1 second. Okay. Try it again.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Tonight, I just wanted to talk a little bit about an issue that Commissioner Dorison brought up during the capital budget plan, and that is our budget process for the operating budget this year. I want to assure you that we are aware and working hard to make sure that we can bring a budget to the board on May 5th that will be a budget that, 1, will maintain mandatory services, and 2, preserve current jobs. We've put some things in place. I sent you the contingency plan that we currently have in place for the rest of this fiscal year. 1, we have a hiring freeze in place. We also have reduced spending. Some examples of that is we've suspended all travel, which was pretty easy to do this time around because none of us can travel. We have to stay at home. And we're also monitoring revenues and also encumbrances that we normally carry over. We're reviewing those really closely. I'm meeting with all department directors this week and last week to talk about the budget. I'm keeping all of them informed. They are the team. This will be a county budget, which requires everyone to work on it together. There's a clear understanding that we're facing an unprecedented event. However, I will tell you that based on some of the things that the environment that I worked in Michigan during the Great Recession, with a 20% unemployment rate in the county I was in, it's a little familiar for me going into this, but I also believe that we can do it as a team, and I look forward to working with all of you once I bring the budget to you. The goal, of course, is not to increase the tax rate, and that's what we're working really hard on doing as we put this budget together. But there will be sacrifices and there will be tough decisions to make going forward. But I know that we can all do it together. And I just wanted to say all this today because I know that there's so much uncertainty and there's concern about how we're facing this, but I wanted to assure you that I don't have any doubt that we as Orange County team, that we can do this and we can get through this. The challenge we face in government always is if the economy goes south, the government demand goes up and the resources go down. And so we figure out how to balance that, but I think we're in a good place to do that. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. That's really assuring. And I have to say that I hope I speak for the commissioners that we're really grateful that you're going to lead us through this. We're happy to have you in this position. So thank you so much. Okay, we have the county attorney's report.
Got several things to report on, and none of them are quite ready for prime time. So you will get that, just not tonight. Nothing tonight.
Okay, thank you, John. We have no appointments. We have
I have a
couple
quick
of
question for John, if I might.
Sure.
John, do you know if the legislature is still planning to come into session at the end of this month as originally scheduled, or Have you heard that they may come into session early or may delay? Have you any update on that?
No update on that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so like I was saying, we have some information items that are pretty standard in the back of the agenda. We have no closed session. And before we leave, I would just like to pass along to the manager and the deputy manager. If you could thank everybody that is still coming to work every day, despite the fact that we're all staying home. We have a lot of folks that have to be on the job, and I don't know. I just don't know if they're getting enough appreciation and thank yous. And I just think that it's important that every time we talk to someone now on staff or see someone on staff or get an email, to make sure that we're thanking them. And if you can pass that on, Bonnie and Travis, that would be much appreciated. And with that, I need someone to make a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Price is making that motion, and McKee second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.